To build a new life, there comes a moment when you must bury the old version of yourself. There is a kind of exhaustion that almost no one notices, but you feel it every single day. It is the quiet fatigue of living in a life that no longer fits you. Like standing too long in a small room with the door open and still not walking out. You go to work. You answer messages. You smile when the moment asks for it. From the outside, nothing seems broken. But inside, something keeps wearing down. Not because life has been unusually cruel, but because an older version of you keeps pulling everything back to the same place. It knows what you fear. It knows when you are weakest. It knows exactly what to whisper when you are about to change. So you postpone, excuse, retreat, and return once again to the habits that are slowly emptying you. This is about surviving the lonely space between who you have been and who you are becoming. It is about rebuilding yourself through real principles, real behavior, and small choices that do not betray your future. Step by step, you will learn how to leave behind emotional dependence, self-sabotage, and the half-lived patterns that keep you stuck. The guiding idea behind this journey is simple and powerful. Lasting change does not begin when you try harder for a few days. It begins when you decide to become someone different, and then repeat the kinds of actions that make that identity real. As James Clear has written, every action is a vote for the person you want to become. Source: James Clear, Identity-Based Habits, How to Actually Stick to Your Goals This Year. That is where your rebuilding starts. Not in fantasy, in practice. Chapter 1. The day you realize you cannot keep living like this. It does not always happen in a dramatic moment. Sometimes it happens on an ordinary evening. So ordinary that if someone looked at your life from the outside, they would say everything seems fine. You made it through the day. You answered what needed answering. You smiled when it was expected. You did what people do when they are trying to look functional. And yet, when the night finally becomes quiet, you stand in front of the mirror and feel something inside you whisper, almost tired of its own voice, "I cannot keep doing this." Maybe your day looked like this. You hit the alarm once, then again, then a third time. You finally got out of bed, not because you were ready to live, but because the clock had cornered you. You moved through the morning in a haze. You got dressed, checked your phone too early, let other people's noise enter your mind before your own thoughts had even formed. At work, you said the right things. You laughed in the right places. You nodded when you needed to nod. You made it through the hours, but inside you felt hollow, as if some deeper part of you had stayed in bed and never came with you. Then you came home, tired in that strange way that is not only physical. You told yourself you deserved a break, so you scrolled. One video became 5. 5 became 40 minutes. 40 minutes became the whole evening. Then the room went dark. The phone slipped onto the bed beside you, and you stared at the ceiling with that old promise in your chest. Tomorrow, I will be different. But you have said that before. You have said it so many times that even you no longer believe the sound of it. That is the painful part. Not that you want to change, not even that you have failed before. It is the moment when your own promises begin to lose weight in your ears, when the voice inside you says tomorrow, and another voice answers quietly, no, you probably will not. There is a kind of shame in that moment that is hard to explain. Not loud shame, not public shame, just the private ache of knowing you are capable of more, and still watching yourself return to the same tired habits, the same excuses, the same diluted version of your life. This chapter is not here to blame you. Blame is cheap, and it rarely changes anyone. What matters is something colder and more honest. Most lives do not fall apart because of one huge disaster. They wear down through repetition, through mornings lived half awake, through evenings handed over to distraction, through weeks spent postponing what matters and feeding what weakens you, through small betrayals that seem harmless because they are familiar. That is what makes them dangerous. They do not feel like destruction while they are happening. They feel like normal life. That is why recognition matters so much. Change rarely begins with confidence. It begins with disgust or grief or exhaustion. It begins when you finally see your pattern clearly enough that you cannot romanticize it anymore. You notice how irritated you have become with yourself, how often you avoid silence because silence tells the truth, how often you repeat behaviors you already promised to leave behind, how often you shrink back into an older personality because it is easier than facing the unknown. You begin to understand that you are not only trapped in circumstances, you are trapped in a version of yourself that has become too familiar to question and too painful to keep. And yet this moment, as hard as it is, carries something sacred inside it. Because the night you become truly tired of your old life is often the first honest night of your new one. Not because everything changes at once, it will not, but because denial starts to crack. You stop pretending that this version of you can carry you much further. You stop calling your patterns temporary when they have already become your lifestyle. You stop waiting for inspiration to rescue you. You finally see that something in you must end if something stronger is ever going to begin. So before you move forward, stay with this question. Do not rush past it. Do not soften it to make yourself comfortable. Let it stand there with all its weight. If you keep living as this same person for 3 more years, what inside you will die first? Chapter 2. What keeps the old you alive? The old version of you does not survive by accident. It survives because something feeds it every day. Imagine an old house with damp walls, rotting wood, and a smell that never leaves. The owner walks through the rooms complaining about the odor, opening windows, spraying perfume, blaming the weather, and saying he wants to fix the place. But every night, before going to sleep, he carries another bag of trash down into the basement and leaves it there. That is how many people live with themselves. They say they are tired of their current life, tired of their weak habits, tired of the same emotional cycles, tired of feeling small, tired of wasting time, tired of watching their own potential fade. And yet, every day, they keep feeding the exact version of themselves they claim they want to leave behind. This chapter is not about willpower. It is about fuel. Because old habits do not stay alive on memory alone. They are fed by routine, by environment, by consumption, by repetition, by the emotional diet you swallow without noticing. There are conversations that make you smaller the moment they begin. You know them. The ones where your better instincts shrink. The ones where cynicism becomes normal. The ones where dreaming bigger feels embarrassing. Some people do not insult your growth directly. They do something quieter. They make your lower self feel more comfortable than your rising self. Then there are the late nights that look harmless until you realize they are slowly stealing your clarity. Staying awake for no real reason. Moving from one piece of noise to another, letting your mind become crowded, tired, and easy to control the next morning. There is also the content you consume when you are too drained to choose carefully. The endless stream of images, opinions, drama, envy, outrage, shallow pleasure, and borrowed urgency. Little by little, your inner world becomes foggy. You do not feel sharply enough to make clean decisions. You do not think clearly enough to build a new life. And then there is self-pity, one of the most seductive foods of all. Self-pity feels soft in the moment. It wraps around you like understanding. It tells you that you have suffered enough, that you deserve escape, that your bad habits are not really your fault. Sometimes pain is real, and compassion matters. But self-pity can become a private excuse factory, a place where you explain yourself so thoroughly that you never challenge yourself. There are also physical places that keep the old you breathing. Streets, cafes, rooms, houses, bars, corners of a city, even chairs and routines that seem ordinary but quietly invite an older version of your mind back into the room. That is why some people fail to change, not because they are weak, but because their whole life is arranged to keep their old identity comfortable. Think of Hung. He always said he wanted to change. He said he was tired of feeling behind, tired of complaining, tired of wasting his strength. He meant it when he said it. But every evening after work, he went to the same cafe, sat with the same group, repeated the same conversations, laughed at the same bitterness, and ended the night with the same heavy feeling in his chest. He thought he lacked discipline. He thought he needed stronger motivation. But the truth was simpler and harder. He had not changed the ecosystem that was keeping the old him alive. Everything around him was arranged in favor of the version he claimed he wanted to outgrow. The language, the schedule, the company, the emotional tone, the after-work rituals, the stories they all kept telling about life. He was not trying to build a new self in fresh soil. He was trying to grow in the same poisoned ground. That is what many people do. They ask for transformation while protecting every condition that prevents it. They want peace, but keep consuming chaos. They want discipline, but keep making comfort too available. They want clarity, but keep drowning in noise. They want self-respect, but keep returning to places where they abandon themselves. The point is not to become paranoid or harsh. The point is to become honest. If the old you is still strong, ask what is feeding it. Because once you see the food, you stop calling the problem mysterious. You understand that your habits are not floating in the air. They are rooted in what surrounds you and what you repeatedly allow inside. If you do not change your environment, your rhythm, and your consumption, your promises will keep echoing back to you from the same old room, sounding sincere for a moment and powerless by morning. Chapter 3. The Empty Room and the Fear of Being Alone. There is a kind of silence that feels almost unbearable when you have spent too long using noise as shelter. Picture a room at night, dim enough to soften the edges of everything. A fan turns slowly. Your phone lies face down on the table for once. No music, no scrolling, no conversation, no distraction waiting to rescue you from yourself. And in that stillness, something unsettling begins to happen. You realize that what frightens you is not the silence itself. It is what the silence reveals when there is nowhere left to run. This chapter is about solitude, but not in the cheap way people often talk about it. Not as a slogan, not as proof of superiority, not as a dramatic performance of being strong alone. Solitude is not automatically healing, and being surrounded by people is not automatically harmful. The truth is deeper than that. Some people are destroyed in crowded rooms. Some people begin to recover in empty ones. The real question is not how many people are around you. The real question is whether you can bear the truth of your own company when no one is there to distract you from it. Many people say they are afraid of being alone, but that is not always what they mean. Often, what they fear is being left without their usual emotional anesthesia, without messages, without drama, without someone to react to, without a screen to absorb them, without a relationship that fills every mental corner, whether it is healthy or not. The empty room becomes difficult because it strips away performance. It asks no one to admire you. It gives you no one to blame. It does not flatter your pain or entertain your restlessness. It simply places you in front of yourself. That is why solitude can feel so sharp at first. It removes your disguises. It shows you your dependence, your unfinished grief, your hunger for validation, your inability to sit still, your need to be chosen, your habit of reaching outward whenever something inward begins to ache. But if you stay, something changes. The silence that first felt like punishment begins to feel more like space. Not easy space. Honest space. Space where your nervous system slowly stops performing. Space where your thoughts stop competing with constant interruption. Space where you start hearing your life more clearly. There is a woman who had just left a long relationship. The relationship had been draining for years, full of tension, repetition, and emotional exhaustion. She knew leaving was the right decision. Even so, the nights terrified her. She did not panic because she missed him so deeply. She panicked because she did not know what to do with herself once the noise was gone. No messages to read and reread. No arguments to replay. No emotional highs and lows to organize her inner world. No person occupying the center of her attention. She would sit on the edge of the bed and feel the emptiness around her like a wall closing in. More than once, she almost went back, not because love was pulling her, because unfamiliar peace was. The silence felt so unnatural that pain began to seem more familiar than freedom. That is how powerful emotional habit can be. People do not only become attached to other people, they become attached to the psychological atmosphere those people create. Even suffering can feel like home if you have lived inside it long enough. That is why learning to be alone is not about turning cold or rejecting connection. It is about becoming able to stay present in your own life without needing constant external occupation. It is about discovering that an empty room can become a place where your mind settles, instead of a place where your fear gets louder. It is about realizing that solitude is not the absence of love. Sometimes, it is the first form of love that does not ask you to abandon yourself. When you stop treating solitude like a sentence and start meeting it like a room where rebuilding can happen, everything changes. The quiet does not become magical overnight. Some nights will still feel long. Some evenings will still make you restless. But little by little, the room changes meaning. It is no longer where you go to feel forgotten. It becomes the workshop where your next self is being made. Chapter 4. How the voice in your head is running your life. I am always like this. I will do it tomorrow. Even if I try, it will not lead anywhere. I am not the kind of person who does big things. These sentences sound small when they pass through your mind. They do not arrive with thunder. They do not announce themselves as danger. They often appear in a tone so familiar that you mistake them for simple honesty. But many lives are quietly shaped by these lines. They become the hidden script behind choices, habits, relationships, and limits. Long before the world tells you no, this voice has already whispered it often enough that you begin to live as if it were fact. That is why this chapter matters. Not because every thought should be treated like an enemy, but because the story you repeat about yourself slowly becomes the life you accept. Most people think they are responding to reality, when in truth, they are responding to an inner narrator they stopped questioning years ago. This narrator can sound calm, reasonable, even protective. It does not always scream. Sometimes it simply shrugs. It says things like, "This is just who you are." It says, "Do not embarrass yourself." It says, "Stay where you are already understood." It says, "People like you do not rise that high." And because it sounds so practiced, you do not notice that it is not describing your life. It is directing it. A person can fail because of lack of skill, lack of opportunity, or bad timing. That is real. But many people lose long before any of that matters because the inner vote has already gone against them. They stand at the edge of a possibility and walk away before life even has the chance to respond. Think about a young man who sees an opening for a better job. It pays more. It fits his abilities. It could move his life in a new direction. He reads the description once, then twice. For a moment, something in him leans forward. Then the inner voice steps in. You are not enough for this. They want someone sharper, someone more confident, someone more accomplished. He has not written the application yet, but he has already accepted rejection. The email saying no has not arrived, but he has sent himself one from inside his own mind. He closes the page, tells himself he is being realistic, and goes back to the life he says he wants to leave. This is how the voice works. It often hides behind the mask of wisdom. It presents fear as self-knowledge. It dresses surrender in the language of maturity. It tells you that avoiding disappointment is the same as understanding your limits. But those are not the same thing. One protects your comfort. The other expands your life. If you listen closely, you will notice that many of these thoughts are old. They may have started in childhood, in a classroom, in a home, in a painful relationship, in one humiliating failure that became a permanent identity. Maybe someone once called you lazy, difficult, weak, slow, unrealistic, too emotional, too quiet, too much, not enough. Maybe you failed once in public and your mind turned one moment into a permanent label. Over time, the voice stopped sounding like that teacher, that parent, that former partner, that frightened younger version of you. It started sounding like you. And that is what makes it powerful. When a lie borrows your voice, it becomes much easier to trust. The point is not to become suspicious of every thought. The point is to notice which thoughts keep you trapped in a smaller life. There are thoughts that guide you and thoughts that reduce you. There are thoughts that sharpen your judgment and thoughts that quietly drain your courage. There are thoughts that help you face truth and thoughts that borrow the language of truth while protecting your fear. Sometimes the most persistent saboteur in your life is not your past, not your circumstances, not the people around you. Sometimes it is the sentence you have been rehearsing about yourself for so long that it now feels like reality. The shock is not that this voice exists. The shock is how often you have obeyed it without realizing it. Once you see that, something important begins. You may not silence the voice overnight, but you stop bowing to it automatically, and that is often the first moment your life begins to belong to you again. Chapter 5. The familiar addiction of procrastination. You sit down at your desk. The task is right there in front of you. It matters. You know it matters. Maybe it is a form you need to fill out, a chapter you need to study, a proposal you need to finish, a message you need to send, a decision you need to make. Nothing is unclear. The work is waiting, and suddenly, almost magically, everything else becomes attractive. You notice the dust on the corner of the table. You decide to tidy a few things first. You check one message, then another. You open a video for a minute. You get up for water. You look at your email even though nothing urgent is there. A strange thing happens in these moments. The important task stays in the center of the room, but your mind circles around it like it is dangerous to touch. This is procrastination. and it is often misunderstood. People call it laziness because that is the easiest label. But procrastination is usually not laziness. It is a more polished problem than that. It is fear wearing everyday clothes. It is avoidance made socially acceptable. It is the quiet art of delaying the very thing that could move your life forward. That is why it is so destructive. It does not ruin you in one dramatic collapse. It eats your future in thin, almost invisible slices. By the time you notice the damage, months have passed, confidence has weakened, and opportunities that once felt close have drifted farther away. The dangerous thing about procrastination is that it can feel productive while it is happening. You are not lying in bed doing nothing. You are doing many little things. You are managing, adjusting, preparing, researching, cleaning, checking, organizing, thinking about beginning. You remain busy enough to avoid the shame of total inaction. But deep down, you know the truth. You are not moving. You are circling. And the circle starts to feel like a home. Imagine someone preparing for an exam that could change the next chapter of life. The books are ready. The schedule exists. The goal is clear. But every time it is time to study seriously, a heaviness enters the room. It is not just boredom. It is the discomfort of finding out where they truly stand. Because as long as they delay, possibility stays intact. They can still tell themselves they would have done well if they had really tried. They can protect the image of who they might be. The moment they fully apply themselves, reality becomes visible. Maybe they are better than they feared. Maybe they are weaker than they hoped. But procrastination protects them from having to know. That is why many people cling to it without understanding what they are doing. They are not only avoiding the task, they are avoiding exposure. They do not fear failure as much as they fear the truth effort might reveal. The same thing happens with the person who says they want a new career but never updates the application, never sends the message, never finishes the portfolio, never takes the course seriously. On the surface, it looks like delay. Underneath it, something more tender is happening. If they try with their full weight and still fall short, they will have to face a painful fact about where they are. So they postpone. Not because they do not care, but because they care enough to be frightened. That is why calling yourself lazy is often too simple and too cruel. It misses the real issue. Your procrastination may be the place where fear goes to hide from daylight. It may be the way you sedate your anxiety while protecting the dream version of yourself from contact with reality. But there is a cost to that protection. The dream remains pure, and your real life remains unchanged. That trade becomes unbearable after a while. One day, you begin to understand something sharp and uncomfortable. As long as you delay, you do not stay safe. You stay unfinished. You remain loyal to a fantasy of your potential while starving the life that could actually grow. That is the bitter truth hidden inside procrastination. Many people are not afraid of failing in the open. They are afraid of discovering, through honest effort, where they truly are. So they delay, distract themselves, and call it timing. But your life will not be rebuilt in the waiting room of your own avoidance. At some point, you have to touch the task, feel the discomfort, and let reality speak. Because only reality can be worked with. Illusion cannot build anything. Chapter 6. A different morning can save the rest of your life. There was a time when you may have started your mornings in panic before the day had even begun. Your eyes opened and your hand reached for your phone before your mind had the chance to belong to you. News, messages, other people's needs, unfinished conversations, notifications, comparisons, noise. Before your feet even touched the floor, your inner world had already been invaded. And from there, the whole day unfolded in the same shape. You did not enter it. You were pulled through it. One demand led to another. One interruption blended into the next. By noon, you were already tired in a way that had less to do with work and more to do with the fact that you had not truly been present for a single clear moment of your own life. This chapter is where the light begins to come in, because after seeing what is broken, you need to know that rebuilding does not always begin with huge decisions. Sometimes it begins with a morning that feels slightly different from the ones that came before it. Not perfect, not dramatic, just different enough to interrupt the old current. Imagine this. You wake up a little earlier, not to become some ideal version of yourself overnight, but simply to stop beginning the day and surrender. The room is quiet. You sit on the edge of the bed for a moment and do nothing. You do not rush to check who wants something from you. You let your breath arrive before the world does. Maybe you wash your face and stand at the window. Maybe you make coffee slowly. Maybe you sit with a notebook, or in silence, or with one honest thought. Then, before touching the noise, you touch what matters. A page, a plan, a walk, a prayer, a stretch, a few minutes with the work that actually belongs to your future. That kind of morning will not fix your whole life in one day, but it changes your posture inside your life. It teaches your nervous system something new. It tells your mind that you are not only here to react, you are here to choose. That shift matters more than people think, because many people do not lose themselves in one collapse. They lose themselves by giving away the first hour of every day until they no longer remember what it feels like to lead their own attention. A rescued morning is not about productivity obsession. It is about reclaiming the front door of your consciousness. It is about refusing to let chaos be the first voice that speaks to you every day. There is warmth in this kind of change because it is not violent. It does not ask you to become severe. It asks you to become available to yourself again. Think of someone who used to begin each day with dread. Always late in spirit even when technically on time, always catching up, always scattered, always promising to regain control tomorrow. Then one morning, almost out of exhaustion, they tried something simpler. They got up 20 minutes earlier. They sat in the stillness instead of running from it. They chose one meaningful action before opening the floodgate of the world. That was all. But by the end of the day, something felt different. Not easier, clearer. The day had not dragged them in the same way. They had entered it standing. That is what a better morning offers. Not perfection, orientation. It reminds you that your life is not only made of giant turning points. It is built in the first decisions of an ordinary day. And sometimes, the path out of confusion does not begin with changing everything. It begins with protecting 1 hour, 1 breath, 1 act of self-direction before the world starts calling your name. Chapter 7. When emotions want to take the wheel. There are days when nothing huge happens, and yet your whole inner world is suddenly shaken by one small moment. A message arrives, and it says less than you hoped. A voice on the phone sounds colder than expected. Someone overlooks you. A plan falls apart. A door closes. A memory returns. A look, a silence, a delay, a rejection. That is all it takes sometimes. And immediately, something in you wants to react. You want to skip the workout you promised yourself. You want to eat not because you are hungry, but because you want relief. You want to send a message you know will only make things messier. You want to throw away the steadiness you built all week because pain has suddenly made it feel pointless. This is where adulthood is tested in one of its least glamorous forms. Not when you are strong, clear, rested, and motivated, but when you are hurt, angry, jealous, ashamed, empty, tired, or emotionally flooded. This chapter is about that moment. The moment when emotion reaches for the wheel and tells you it should be driving now. Emotions are real. They matter. They carry information. They deserve respect. But not everything that is real should be placed in charge. If you hand over your choices to every wave that passes through you, your life will keep changing direction according to weather instead of wisdom. There are days when maturity is not a grand act of discipline. It is simply the quiet decision not to let sadness make your decisions for you. Not to let humiliation choose your words. Not to let loneliness reopen the wrong door. Not to let anger light a fire that your calmer self will have to put out tomorrow. Picture a woman standing alone in her kitchen after a terrible phone call. Her chest is tight, her thoughts are racing. Her hand is wrapped around her phone. Every part of her wants to call back, not because she has something wise to say, but because she wants to explain, plead, defend herself, be understood, be chosen again. Stop the discomfort immediately. In moments like that, a whole future can lean on one small act. She stands there for a long time. The urge rises, then rises again. Then she does something almost invisible. She puts the phone down. She pours herself a glass of water. She opens the window. She feels the air move through the room. She does not solve her life in that moment. She does something smaller and more powerful. She lets the wave pass without turning it into action. And many lives are changed exactly that way. Not by dramatic breakthroughs, but by the growing ability to endure an emotion without obeying it. This does not mean becoming numb. It does not mean pretending you are not affected. It means understanding that a feeling can move through you without becoming your commander. It means making room for grief without making choices from grief. Making room for anger without speaking from anger. Making room for emptiness without running straight back into whatever once distracted you from it. The truth is that many people do not destroy their progress because they lack knowledge. They destroy it in one emotional hour. 1 hour of craving. 1 hour of wounded pride. 1 hour of loneliness. 1 hour of rage. That is why learning to stay still inside a feeling is one of the deepest forms of strength. You begin to realize that not every urge deserves a response. Not every emotion deserves a decision. Not every wave deserves a steering wheel. And once you learn that, a different kind of peace enters your life. Not the peace of always feeling good, but the peace of no longer being ruled by every feeling that arrives. That peace is quiet, but it is powerful, because when your emotions stop driving your life, your values finally can. Chapter 8. Letting go of the old story about yourself. The most tragic person is not the one who fails. It is the one who lives an entire life inside a false description of who they are. That sentence matters because this chapter sits at the center of everything. You can change your schedule. You can improve your habits. You can leave a few bad patterns behind. But if the old story about who you are remains untouched, it will quietly rebuild the same life in a different form. That is why real transformation asks for more than better behavior. It asks for the courage to question the identity you have been rehearsing for years. Many people are walking through life wearing labels that were handed to them long ago. I am weak. I am not naturally gifted. I always quit halfway through. People from my family never go far. I am too emotional. I am not leadership material. I am always behind. I am the kind of person who ruins good things. These sentences become so familiar that they stop sounding like opinions and start sounding like biography. That is how identity traps you. Not with chains you can see, but with descriptions you stop examining. you begin living in a way that proves those old lines correct. You hesitate at the exact moment courage is required. You withdraw when life invites you forward. You lower your standards before anyone else has the chance to reject you. You call it realism, but often it is loyalty to an outdated version of yourself. There was a boy who grew up hearing the same sentence again and again in his own home. You are slow. You will never amount to much. It was said casually sometimes, angrily at other times, but always often enough to sink deep. As a child, he had no defense against it. He simply absorbed it. Years passed. He became an adult. On the surface, no one was saying those words anymore, but inside him, the sentence remained alive. Whenever a real opportunity came near, something strange happened. He stepped back, not in an obvious way. He delayed. He doubted. He found reasons to wait. He minimized his own readiness. He called himself cautious. But the truth was more painful. If he had stepped fully into a better life, he would have had to betray the story that had fed his identity since childhood. And as strange as it sounds, human beings are often more loyal to familiar pain than to unfamiliar possibility. A painful story can still feel like home if you have lived inside it long enough. That is why people do not only resist change because it is hard. They resist it because change threatens the identity that has organized their life for years. If you stop being the weak one, the overlooked one, the one who always loses, the one who needs saving, the one who never finishes, then who are you now? That question can feel terrifying. It can feel like standing in a doorway without knowing whether the ground on the other side will hold you. But this is the doorway the whole book has been leading toward. Destroying the old you does not mean removing a few bad habits while keeping the old self-image intact. It means refusing to keep narrating your life through a script that no longer deserves authority. It means seeing that some of what you call personality is actually repetition. Some of what you call truth is inherited shame. Some of what you call self-knowledge is an old wound that learned to speak in your voice. This does not mean your pain was imagined. It means your pain is not allowed to keep writing your identity forever. There comes a point when you must decide that the story which once explained you is no longer allowed to define you. That decision is not loud. It happens quietly, deep inside. You begin to notice the old sentences when they appear. You hear them, but you do not kneel to them the same way. You feel the pull to remain loyal to the smaller version of yourself. But you begin to understand that your future will demand a kind of betrayal. Not betrayal of what is true, but betrayal of what has kept you bound. The old story may have once protected you. It may have helped you survive confusion, rejection, criticism, or neglect. But survival is not the same as identity. You are not here to spend your whole life proving the worst things said about you were correct. You are here to outgrow the description that was written before you knew you had the right to answer back. Chapter 9. The relationships that keep you from growing up. Not everyone who stood beside you belongs in the life you are trying to build now. That truth hurts because it goes against something tender in you. You want to believe that if people know you, love you, laugh with you, remember your past, then they must also belong to your future. But that is not always how life works. Some relationships are real, yet no longer right. Some people are not cruel, yet still stand in the way of your growth. This chapter is not about turning every difficult connection into a villain. It is more subtle than that. There are people who are attached not to your highest self, but to the version of you that was easier to predict, easier to influence, easier to keep small. They do not always want to harm you. Sometimes they simply feel more comfortable when you are less clear, less disciplined, less independent, less changed. Your old self made them feel secure. Your growing self unsettles them. They may not say it directly. They may joke. They may tease. They may call you dramatic, distant, too serious, too ambitious, too sensitive, too different now. But underneath those reactions is often one simple discomfort. They can feel that you are becoming harder to pull back into the old pattern. Think of Anne. When she began taking her work seriously, sleeping at better hours, protecting her mornings, and saying no to things that drained her, her old group of friends changed toward her almost immediately. They called her fake. They said she was trying too hard. They laughed at her routines. They told her she had become cold and boring. At first, she felt guilty. She wondered if she really had changed in a bad way. She almost softened herself again just to keep the atmosphere easy. But after a while, she understood something important. They were not upset because she had become worse. They were upset because she had become less available to the version of life they all used to reinforce in one another. She was no longer as easy to pull into late nights, loose priorities, repeated complaining, or emotional chaos. Her growth was forcing a mirror into the room, and not everyone likes being shown what they are avoiding. That is why some relationships begin to strain the moment you start respecting yourself more. It is not always because people hate your progress. Sometimes your progress changes the role you used to play in their emotional world. Maybe you were the one who always agreed, always stayed, always made yourself smaller to keep peace, always tolerated the same behavior, always remained reachable when they needed comfort, but disappeared when you needed depth. The moment you stop performing that role, the relationship reveals what it was built on. This does not mean you must become harsh. It does not mean every separation must become a war. Often the deepest changes happen quietly. A little more distance, a little more clarity, a few invitations declined, a few conversations no longer fed, a few doors that stop opening in the same way they used to. There is grief in this, and it should be honored. Outgrowing people can hurt even when it is necessary. You can miss what once felt familiar and still know you cannot go back without losing something essential in yourself. Not everyone will welcome the boundaries that protect your peace. Not everyone will understand why the old version of you is no longer available. But understanding from others is not the measure of whether your growth is real. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your future is accept that a certain closeness belonged to a former chapter. Some distances are not tragedies. They are tuition. They are the price of becoming someone your old life can no longer fully contain. And once you understand that, you stop treating every goodbye as failure. Some goodbyes are not proof that something broke. They are proof that something in you finally refused to stay small. Chapter 10. Learning to carry pain without turning it into drama. Pain reveals people in very different ways. One person uses pain as evidence that life has singled them out for unfairness. Another uses pain as a place to become quieter, clearer, and stronger in the exact places where they used to break. That difference matters, not because suffering automatically makes anyone wiser, and not because pain should be admired for its own sake, but because the way you carry pain slowly becomes part of your character. This chapter is not here to glorify suffering. It is not here to sell you the cheap idea that pain will magically make you powerful. Pain does not automatically improve anyone. Sometimes it only hardens them in the wrong direction. Sometimes it makes them bitter, theatrical, self-absorbed, or addicted to the identity of the wounded person. So, let us be honest. Not all pain is noble. Some pain comes from living out of alignment, from staying in the wrong place too long, from loving the wrong person in the wrong way, from repeating the same destructive habit until it starts feeling like fate. It is the consequence of ignoring what your deeper self has been trying to tell you for a long time. But there is another kind of pain, and this one matters. It is the pain that comes with growing up. The pain of saying no to what once had easy access to you. The pain of not reaching for the old escape route. The pain of staying silent when your ego wants to prove a point. The pain of continuing with dignity on a day when you feel no fire, no thrill, no visible reward. This pain is different. It does not destroy your center. It builds it. Think of someone who is trying to break a small but powerful habit. Every time loneliness hits, they used to send a message to an old partner. Not always because love was still alive. Often because the message offered temporary anesthesia. It filled the empty hour. Main his tight. It created the illusion of connection. It distracted them from grief, boredom, insecurity, and longing. They knew the pattern well. A weak moment, a message, a temporary softening, then confusion again. Then shame. Then emotional dependency starting all over. One evening, the urge returned as it always did. The room felt heavier than usual. The phone was right there. The old sentence was ready. Just a small message. Just to see. Just to feel less alone for 1 minute. No one would have called it a major moral test. No one would have handed out medals for resisting it. From the outside, it was almost nothing. A private moment in a quiet room, but from the inside, it was a turning point. Because what was really happening was much deeper than a text message. A human being was standing at the edge of an old reflex and deciding whether to feed it again. That night, they did not send it. The urge rose and stayed. It moved through the body like heat. It made the silence feel sharper. It made the room feel wider. It asked to be obeyed, and still they did not send it. The night passed. Then another night came, and the same thing happened again. No applause, no visible transformation, just a growing ability to remain inside discomfort without converting it into self-betrayal. This is how inner strength is built in real life. Not through dramatic speeches, not through public declarations, but through these quiet acts of endurance. Through the moments when pain arrives and you refuse to perform it, decorate it, broadcast it, or use it as permission to fall apart. That does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean pretending you are untouched. It means refusing to turn every wound into identity and every difficult feeling into a stage. There is dignity in that. There is maturity in that. There is a kind of beauty in the person who suffers honestly without making suffering their personality. You do not need to romanticize pain to learn from it. You only need to stop fleeing from every form of discomfort that growth requires. Some evenings will feel longer because you are no longer escaping the old way. Some decisions will sting because you are finally choosing what is right instead of what is soothing. Some silences will hurt because your ego is not getting the last word. But every time you endure one of these moments without collapsing into the old script, something in you becomes steadier. The emotional spine thickens. The nervous system learns that discomfort is survivable. The soul learns that not every ache is an emergency. Over time, that changes you. You become less dramatic, not because you care less, but because you no longer need to convert pain into spectacle in order to feel it is real. You become less fragile, not because you stop hurting, but because pain stops having the power to rearrange your values every time it appears. And perhaps that is one of the deepest forms of growth. To feel deeply, to hurt honestly, and still remain in command of the kind of person you choose to be. Chapter 11. Self-respect is built in very small things. You do not lose trust in yourself in a single day. You lose it through hundreds of moments when you make a promise and quietly walk away from it. That is the truth at the center of this chapter. Self-respect is not built from posture, from impressive language, from confidence tricks, or from the image you project to other people. It is built much closer to the ground than that. It is built in the private relationship between you and your own word. Do you believe yourself when you say you will do something? Do you feel deep inside that your promises carry weight? Or have you trained your own heart to hear your intentions as another form of delay? That is why self-respect feels so different from performance. Performance is outward. Self-respect is inward. Performance wants to be seen. Self-respect wants to be true. A person can be doubted by the whole world and still remain standing if there is something solid inside that says, "I do not abandon myself." But when you know that you often betray your own commitments, encouragement from others passes through you, like wind through an open window. It touches nothing. It stays nowhere. This is where many people misunderstand their real wound. They think they need more motivation, more praise, more external support, more confidence. Often what they need is simpler and more demanding. They need evidence. They need to experience themselves as someone who can be trusted again. And trust is rarely rebuilt through huge, dramatic efforts. It is rebuilt through small acts repeated long enough to feel believable. Think of a middle-aged man after a painful breakup. His life did not collapse in a spectacular way, but it lost structure. He still went through the motions. He still showed up where he had to, but something inside him had gone loose. The home felt heavier. The evenings felt shapeless. He stopped expecting much from himself because expecting less hurt less. For a while, everything in his life reflected that inner disorder. Then, one night, with no big plan and no speech about becoming a new man, he did something very small. Before going to bed, he cleared his desk. He threw away old papers, stacked a few books, wiped the surface, and left the chair tucked in. That was all. It was such a small act that almost no one would have called it important. But the next morning, when he walked past that corner of the room, something in him registered the change. There was one place in his life where disorder had not won. One place where he had left behind a sign of care instead of neglect, so he did it again that night. Then again. After a few weeks, that desk was no longer just a clean surface. It had become proof. Proof that he could still create order. Proof that he could still keep a simple promise. Proof that he was not entirely at the mercy of his sadness. And from that one corner, other things began to shift. He started sleeping a little earlier. He handled one delayed task. He cooked a real meal. He answered a message he had been avoiding. Not because his life suddenly became easy, but because one small act had started restoring his credibility with himself. This is why small things are not small. They are the workshop where self-respect is forged. Every time you follow through on something modest but meaningful, you cast a vote in favor of being a person who does not disappear when things get hard. You do not need to begin with heroic act. In fact, heroic acts often fail because they ask too much from a self that no longer trusts its own voice. What you need first is something quieter, something repeatable, something that says, "I am still here, and I still mean what I say." The world often celebrates dramatic reinventions, but the deeper miracle is less visible. It is the person who begins to keep tiny agreements with themselves again. The person who does the simple thing they said they would do, even when no one is watching and no one would punish them for skipping it. That is where self-respect returns. Not all at once, not in a speech, in the ordinary sacredness of not walking away from yourself again. Over time, these small acts gather weight. They stop being isolated gestures and become a pattern. Then the pattern becomes identity. And one day, without fanfare, you notice that your inner life feels different, more settled, more upright, less hungry for outside approval. Because the deepest confidence is not loud. It is the quiet knowledge that when you speak to yourself about what matters, you are no longer listening to someone unreliable. The journey of this book was never about searching for a completely different person somewhere outside yourself. It was about finding the courage to end what had already expired within you. From the moment you realized you could not keep living the same way, to the moment you stopped feeding old habits, learned to endure solitude, listened to the voice inside your mind, moved through procrastination, rebuilt your mornings, kept your emotions from driving your life, released the old story about who you were, stepped away from relationships that kept you small, learned how to carry pain without becoming consumed by it, rebuilt self-respect, took power back from the past, and chose to live with integrity even when no one was watching. Every part of this path belonged to the same transformation. Nothing was extra. Nothing repeated itself without purpose. Every step led to the next. The core message is simple. You do not build a new life by hating yourself more intensely. You build it by starving the old self and remaining loyal long enough to the new one. That loyalty will not always look dramatic. Most of the time, it will look quiet. It will look like a better choice made in a small moment, a pause before an old reaction, a boundary kept, a promise honored, a silence endured, a mourning protected. This is how a life changes. Not all at once, but in ways that become irreversible over time. So tomorrow, do not begin with a giant vow. Do not demand a complete reinvention before breakfast. Change one moment, only one. The first moment after you wake up. Do not hand it to your phone, your anxiety, or your old automatic patterns. Keep that moment for the person you are becoming. Sit with it, breathe inside it. Stand up differently inside it. Sometimes an entire new life begins with one protected morning.